Hello everybody, this is going to be our group presentation for MIS 3000. It's going to be involving disk replay and their business process analysis. This presentation is narrated by Justin Carrier
and Jake Cebulski.
Alright, so we're going to begin with disk replay's business description. So disk replay specializes in the selling, buying, and trading of video games, video game accessories, computers, video game consoles, and all sorts of stuff like that. So they have physical stores, all the business is done in person and none is done online, and they sell their products directly to customers.
Disk Replay is going to be trying to get an online marketplace in the future. However, as a small business, it is difficult for them to get that rolled out at this time.
So now we're going to discuss Disk Replay's main business process. So they're a retail company and their main process in the business is to create sales.
So in creating sales, we mainly sell customer-given inventory. By that, I mean we buy, sell, and trade. Customers will bring in inventory to trade to us as well as sell to us either for store credit or cash. To entice the customer, Disk Replay offers 30% more in-store credit for each item over the cash offer.
And buying customer inventory ultimately lowers the cost of goods for the company, thus increasing profits in the long run.
Products are on display for customer browsing. The customer then brings their chosen product to the register, and the customer inquires about purchasing. At this step, we also will cash out a buy if they were selling or trading items, so that way we can use that store credit and apply it towards their purchase.
So now I'm going to show you a data flow diagram that demonstrates this process here. So once a customer has selected what items they'd like to purchase or trade in, they're going to go up to the register and the employee will relay the final price. The customer will then accept or decline that price, and the employee will use the computer to conduct this transaction. Then during the transaction, the payment will be received by the customer, and finally the receipt and the product will be given to the customer and they will be on their way.
This process also applies to the buying or trading process, except instead of payment received from the customer, payment would be given to the customer in the form of store credit or cash. Then we would have them sign a receipt saying that they themselves traded that item, and they would get a receipt for their records as well.
So now that you guys know a little bit about Disk Replay, we're going to demonstrate the glaring problem here with this business. So internally in Disk Replay, there's a great opportunity for theft. There's no separation of duties, no authorization requirement, and no monitoring of employee actions.
This means that any level employee can go into the system and the system will think that they are a manager, for example, if they are doing something like deleting inventory or changing stock levels. They could also perform fraudulent sales or open the register even.
So this opens the door for employees to end up stealing things from the company. And here is a scenario of this theft. So say that we have a broke college student that loves video games and they're just hired into this store. After a couple months of working there, no problems rise and they gain the trust of the employer. After these couple months go by, they're eventually left alone in the store without a manager or any other employees monitoring them. This brings up a great opportunity for theft for the broke college student that does love video games. The theft is then performed by the employee by using the equal privileges that are given by all employees in the system to override and to steal whatever they would like. And then those records of inventory and sales can then be edited by this employee. That leaves the employer ultimately unaware, and the discrepancy is not found until the physical inventory count, when the employer will actually have no idea where that inventory went. So now we're going to talk about the alternative software that we've come up with and how it's going to solve this theft problem.
So the program we use at Discreplay is called Drop. It is a proprietary software created internally just for Discreplay. It conducts things such as punching in and out, doing sales, buys, transactions of any sort, deleting inventory, just about anything you would need to do on a computer or point of sale system.
The problem with Drop is that all employees have equal privileges and there's no unique employee IDs. In our new process, we want to add an authentication factor with unique employee IDs with specific privileges based on their level of employment, and we will supply a card to swipe to authenticate this employee. We also want to make sure that one employee is logged in at a time just to keep better track of these transactions. So we need to also make sure that employees are being monitored. Their daily activities and their transactions need to be monitored and recorded in a database. And these unique IDs need to be assigned to each activity. That way the employer can figure out which employee is doing what transaction. This will help them pinpoint all the discrepancies later on.
As for authorization, we would give specific permissions to different levels of employees, such as managers, supervisors, and sales associates. Manager approval requirements would also be implemented in case somebody needs to open up a register or something of the sort. They would just go get a manager to do it for them rather than them themselves being able to do it.
So now we're going to talk about the feasibility. If we're going to implement something like this, we're going to have multiple different factors preventing us from starting something like this up. There's going to be multiple economic factors that we need to worry about, as well as technological factors, operational things, and then of course the time frame that it is going to take to implement all of these different types of softwares. Starting with the economic factors, there are going to be a lot of costs to get this whole thing started up. The employer is going to have to purchase cards and readers, and they're going to need to buy some new software to get this whole thing going. There are going to be some benefits though. There's going to be a lot less theft internally by employees and a simplification of duties. In the long run, this is going to increase profits. Although there's going to be a big initial cost, profits will be increased in the long run by implementing these softwares.
The technological side, there would be new software. Similar solutions would be implemented that are in use by other companies. They're generally adaptable to specific store situations, which would make it great in order to set those permissions and authorization requirements. New hardware as well, such as a card reader to take employee unique ID cards to make use of that new technology.
So now we're going to talk about the operational feasibility. This may be the hardest part because this would be the part where we have to convince the employer to be willing to make this change. Now, sometimes those big initial investments may turn off the owner, but the process is not set in stone yet, and the employee training is not yet solidified.
Necessary maintenance is integral in the business process to keep everything up and running. When bugs are found and such, we want to make sure that we find those and squash them to keep the employee experience on the software as smooth as possible.
So now let's talk about the time frame. Implementing all these different things is of course going to take some time. The hardware acquisition is going to take time, as well as the software installation, and then of course the employee training.
Employee training generally lasts anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how quickly they learn the system. The problem is that with the old system, they're able to quickly learn how to take advantage of it, and that's where potential for theft arises early on in the business process.
And we believe for this new process that employee training should not last more than 1 week for them to get accustomed to our new process. So this should not be the biggest concern. So now we're going to discuss our new process and how that works. And here's a diagram right here.
The employee signs in when they're doing a transaction. The customer will purchase that item. The sold item removed from an inventory count. Any items that were traded, received items get added to the inventory count. The manager compares inventory count to physical count, and if there are any discrepancies are investigated. However, with the new system, there shouldn't be any discrepancies.
So now we're going to discuss the necessary controls of our new application. There's going to be job title restrictions and manager-only actions. So by giving the employees different levels of privileges, we can authorize only managers to finalize transactions and not allow lower level employees to do things on their own.
Some of these manager-only actions would also include opening the register, reversing sales, voiding sales, manually entering card numbers into the credit card machine, things such as that.
On an operational level, we need to make sure that if an employee's card is lost or stolen, it is immediately reported. That way, other employees cannot use their card to falsify transactions and get them in trouble. We need to emphasize the confidentiality of these employee logins in order to prevent somebody getting someone else in trouble for something that they did. There are not many concerns about our application as there's no personal information on the card, so employees should not be worried about that. However, they should keep track of their card at all times if they would not like to be held accountable for missing or stolen inventory. So now we're going to discuss the application specifics. We're planning on having a downloaded software that can be installed on any device. It'll utilize Wi-Fi and internally store information. We're also going to have database management systems that store employee data and log actions. We're also going to store inventory data and record all of these transactions that go on with the customers.
Getting these reports generated for management is also incredibly helpful due to the fact that they can see sales for the day, inventory deleted for the day, inventory deleted for the week, year-to-date things such as that, other financial reports and other inventory reports. They can also see stuff that the computer marks as suspicious, such as a specific lower-level employee trying to delete inventory, something like that.
So now we're going to talk about our pilot implementation. We're going to test this for about 30 days, particularly in one testing store throughout the Southeast Michigan region. And we're going to use a small group of employees. Now, since these stores are not very large, we could test this throughout the entire store with every employee. And then, of course, we're going to have to report the bugs or issues immediately to the owner and make sure that we squash those right away so that the company can be fully ready to implement this new process.
As a small business, this should not be entirely difficult for Disc Replay. If everything goes smoothly and all the levels of employees, including IT and the people who steward the app, do their parts, it should be a process that is easily implemented.
Now let's talk about employee stewardship. So the employees that are going to be using this new software are going to need some very basic requirements such as basic technology knowledge, and they're going to need just a little bit of training received, like we said, that 30-day period. However, for a lot of employees, this shouldn't take more than 1 week of using, and they will get used to the use of this specific application. They're going to have some responsibilities such as efficiency in their duties and knowledge of the store layout.
They also want to have knowledge of the application through and through to make sure that they are able to perform all their duties when required. They also want to make sure that the necessary permissions and authorization requirements are in place and working when they're necessary.
And of course, another responsibility of these employees would be to keep very good track of where your card is at all times in order to prevent other people putting their losses and their steals on you. So now we're going to discuss the long-term plan for this operation. There are going to be a lot of continued benefits like reduced theft, and it's going to continue to serve its initial purpose for a very long time. Now, in the future, when employees get used to using this application, there may be a chance that there's a possibility of them bypassing certain controls. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on in the future. We can also expand this application to other processes, such as payroll or employee clock-ins or other type of inventory database programs. Some potential problems is there is a lack of transaction restrictions.
Other potential problems could be that employees could learn how to get away with suspicious activity without it reporting to a manager, or they could also figure out an employee's unique ID code and use that in lieu of their ID card.
So in conclusion, we feel that this application would be very beneficial to the employers and the owners of Disc Replay. If we could convince them to make use of our application, they could then reduce theft in the long run and create employee permissions that'll help them keep better track of their inventory. Thank you all for listening, and this has been our presentation on Disc Replay.